afternoon. Welcome to the Circles podcast on the Nomadic channel. I'm Charlene Lee, and today our guests are Amy Swanson and Cody Birkland from Ultropia.
Ultropia, you got it.
That's right. All right. So we're really excited to have these guys on the podcast because they're building a product that's basically, it's the one modern invention that we can never live without again. No one ever wants to go back to the time before this product was invented. So I'm going to, just with that little setup, I'm going to go to you, Amy and Cody, and can you tell us a little about how you met, how you know each other, and what made you decide to start a company?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, do you want to go first? I feel like you do a good job of this story.
And so I have a traditional career path. I feel like I didn't get my bachelor's degree till after I had a baby, and I feel like I was 30 years old, and I was like, I want to get an electrical engineering degree. And so I feel like
wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, my dad really encouraged me. He's like, you can do more with a bachelor's. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do. It took me a long time to decide on electrical engineering. And when I did, I feel like it was during the pandemic. Everything was shut down. I know, but before the lab was open, I had access to all these awesome tools. And so it was very different. It was during the pandemic. And I was going to North Seattle Community College. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I met a professor there, Dr. Niati, and he's like, I have this electrical engineering program. And he has been such an amazing mentor throughout my journey. And so he really encouraged me to go into this program. And because of the pandemic, I actually met Cody, who is at the Cheney campus of Eastern Washington University. And so during that process,
how did you meet him, though? Did you go out?
It was all online for a while. And eventually I would go back and forth and drive to Spokane.
Yeah.
But because it was all online, we got to work together very, very closely.
Yeah. We would have never met if it wasn't for the pandemic.
Yeah.
Because she was in Seattle, I was in Spokane, and because, everything, school was virtual, we're actually able to work together. We met each other.
Yeah, because that whole thing just sort of blossomed over the whole virtual thing. That's interesting.
And because of that, Cody ended up starting a student chapter of the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. I actually tried to start a similar chapter, but I couldn't really get any engagement. And so I was so excited when he was starting a chapter.
Yeah, it was in the Cheney campus of EWU. And we had planned for this start in spring of 2020, and did a bunch of work to put that together. And the week before the quarter started, the school shut down, and so we're like, okay, well, I guess we're going to pivot to an online format. And that actually worked out pretty well, because one of the first things we did when we started the organization is look for officers, and we were able to look across multiple campuses because everyone was able to collaborate online. And
that's so great.
Yeah, so we did a few projects, and then once the officers got started, Amy was the treasurer and I was the president. And so that's really where we started working together.
And that was the first time you got an inkling that Cody has some luck about him, right? Because things sort of happen around him. I had that story with the Prusik people. Oh my gosh.
He is a lucky person for sure. I feel like I've never seen someone that's so I feel like I have the opposite luck, and so maybe it's good. Yeah. Some of it is he makes good decisions overall, but like genuine luck, I feel like Cody has it.
He's in tune with the universe.
Yeah, some of it's just he's where he should be doing the things he should be doing. Yeah.
Maybe you can give us a little backdrop about why you decided to start the company and what is the problem that you're trying to, because I saw that was those are really interesting stats on there.
And so through IEEE, we did a lot of student projects together, and so we found that we really liked working together. We made the first kickoff project was a Skittles sorting machine, and it sorted Skittles by colors. We made a drivable couch.
Oh my God, I'm sure someone would.
Yeah. And we could drive the couch around it. We made it as a recruitment tool. We're like, if we drive this couch around campus, people will definitely want to join IEEE.
Yeah.
We made a bunch of physical therapists contacted us, and they're like, hey, could you adapt toys for our students? They're having difficulty playing with the toys, and so we adapted some toys. And we found that we really enjoyed working together. And Eastern Washington University had a startup competition, and Cody had entered it the year before, And I just think anyone who wants to work with you that you enjoy working with, like, hold on to that person. It's really special to find that kind of relationship. And he was like, hey, like, I had mentioned that I hate laundry, and I always wanted to make a device, especially as a mom. And I feel like before I was I went to electrical engineering school, I cleaned a lot of houses, and so I got to go inside a lot of people's homes, and I saw people will pay you money to do their laundry, and just going into people's home and seeing how they move through their spaces and what their relationship with clothing is, with their item is. I mean, I just really wanted to create just a system for myself as well as for others that just was a lot more streamlined process for laundry. And so the original vision was like, you would take off your clothes at the end of the day and you would put them in your closet and would wash them and it would dry them and would hang them up and you wouldn't have to think about it anymore. And it's still a vision that we would like to get to.
It's like a Jetson lifestyle.
Yeah, it's still the goal. We went to my dad's home over spring break and we built this massive closet, and it was like 9 feet tall and it was really wide. And I think even in a current iteration of that wouldn't look like that, but I think it was good to go through that process. And I think what we realized is we wanted to use ultrasound to build the technology, but that really got us our start in this direction.
Yeah, because we're in the constraint of this approach, we realized that the traditional technology wasn't going to work. And so we wanted to try something that was a lot more energy efficient, and it just made sense to use ultrasound because you're circumventing the limitations of the current technology, which really hasn't changed for 150 years. You know, they've added some motors, they made some efficiencies, but there really haven't been that many improvements in residential laundry. And I think we'll get into there's a lot more problems than just convenience. And that's part of what we learned in this initial iteration. Is really talking to our customers more and, you know, defining, we didn't know who our customers were because we didn't talk to a lot of people. But
we took a very much engineering approach. We're like, we can build stuff. Let's build something.
No, I think that's actually what is really, I mean, the more I learn about it and looking at the materials, it's really interesting, sort of the problem. I know it from working, I'm working on the plastics part, but I know that there are big sustainability initiatives. There's a big problem, but the water problem is not something people have gained a lot of traction on. It's still a problem. It's a huge waste problem all over our systems. And so when I heard about your product, I was like, oh my God, someone came up with that. What was the first sort of piece of the bigger perspective that you discovered?
And I think Cody threw it out there very on initially. He's like, hey, this could be like a lot more things. This could be like a very compact washer and dryer that is accessible to people all over the world, maybe in areas where they don't have access to typical resources. And so he threw it out there very early on, despite us building this more massive thing for convenience. And so I think he had an inkling of that. And I feel like I've gone back through our messages. I'm like, oh, Cody kind of hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah, that was part of it. I think my experience, just maybe jumping around a little bit, but growing up, I grew up in the country. As I got older, by the time I was 15 or 16, I was helping my family with their family construction business. And I always liked working on things. And I think from construction and learning, I remember cleaning up job sites when I was 6 or 7 years old. And I was just always kind of exposed to building things. And I just kind of took that forward, built a skill set of just being able to take things apart, understand how they work, and fix them. And based on that, I kind of naturally grew into helping people when things broke. And one of the things that people would always need help with is their laundry appliances. And so growing up, I worked on a lot of washers and dryers.
Oh my gosh.
And I got it, I think, kind of similar in, to, Amy cleaning homes and working with people to see their lifestyle. I got to see how important laundry appliances were to people and how much of a disruption to their life. I mean, if you have 4 or 5 kids and your appliance breaks, and especially out in the country where you don't really have that many alternatives.
Absolutely. Let's talk about micro housing, mobile housing. Those guys are just desperate to have something that they can get into their system. It costs them so much extra. And then the water usage is so much extra hassle. But it's so interesting that your background sort of really helped you find the right consumer, touchstones, because I think this is a big problem where you have a lot of technology and a lot of people who can build things, but they have no connection to their customers or what the consumer market really needs.
Yeah, so we had a little bit of a seed there with our own, individual experiences.
Yeah.
But like Amy was saying, we started with the engineering approach, and we built stuff because we thought that was what was needed. And it wasn't until after we kind of looked, stepped back and was like, hey, this is big, this is expensive, this doesn't make a lot of sense from a business standpoint, and we don't actually really know who our customer is or how we reach them or deliver a product to them.
Right.
So we should go talk to a lot of people. And I think that was a major next step. But
and we had a lot of mentorship, and I think that was very key too. And so I think being at Eastern Washington University, they had an entrepreneurship center. The person leading the program was really, really amazing. And I feel like he showed us so many tools and so many resources. And so I just feel like the way that he ran that competition was a massive educational piece for us. And so I feel like just all along the way, I feel it's like we've learned something from people, and we've learned a lot in a really short period of time.
Yeah, I think that the competitions, if they're actually designed right, you learn a lot. You gain a big learning curve, even if it's just learning how to apply for them and how to present yourself.
Applying for things is time consuming. And
it's time consuming. Yeah, and it's I think that, but there is a learning value to it.
There's huge value to it.
Yeah. And then sort of defining that sort of happened to me too. But I'm going to just let you continue with, the size of the problem, which I was surprised about. I didn't know.
Maybe I feel like we haven't really introduced the company yet. So I think we got...
Okay, let's do it.
Well, I think there's probably steps to it, too. And so I think after we won our university's pitch competition, and a lot of that was because we did this customer discovery process, we were like, hey, this is something that we want to pursue full time. And I think we had just finished our bachelor's degrees, and a lot of people, they go out and they're like, and I think I was expecting too, I'm just going to go get a full-time job as an engineer somewhere. But I think I haven't had so much, demand for anything that I'm doing, and I've had so much support, and I feel like there wasn't anything else I've ever done in my life where people are like, oh my goodness, this is amazing, you should work on this. And I think just having that amount of support, and then people giving me the tools to succeed, I feel like I'm like, okay, this is, and it's very, very risky, because it's I want to be able to support my daughter, and I want to go off and do something very, very risky, and it's a very, very risky thing to do.
Yes, it is.
And so over the summer, we participated in 2 programs that I think progressed us, and then we formed the company, as well as we had access to more resources. So one of those programs was Founders Institute, which was really, really great. The head of that program, Jeremy Zretsky, was really, really amazing. He was a lot of the reason we did that program. He offered us a fellowship, which was awesome. And then it was such an awesome learning period just to pitch again and again. We also did the National Science Foundation Innovation Corps program at the University of Washington, the regional hub. Yeah. And that's when they teach you how to use the lean business model canvas and apply the scientific method to customer discovery. And so they have a couple different sections. Instead of making an entire business plan waterfall style, you create these questions like, who is my customer segment? Who, what resources do I need? What is my business model? And then you go test these hypotheses by interviewing a bunch of people.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's actually it's a really renowned program though.
Yeah. That was super foundational to what we did. And then on the technical side, we started working at the University of Washington. So Cody's plan was to go to grad school at the University of Washington. Yeah. And then at the University of Washington, there's a Center for Industrial and Medical Ultrasound. And I think this is another area where we got really lucky. The director there was just super amazing. Very, very welcoming. He put us on a project there that's also going very well with a separate technology, but we just realized we wanted to move away from the way that current washers and dryers work. So it's a lot of agitation. It's very, very friction based. And in our research, we were thinking, hey, it should be based around ultrasound, but we don't know enough about ultrasound. And so we went to the Center for Industrial and Medical Ultrasound just to learn more about the technology.
Yeah, because we started the prototypes that we built, we used off-the-shelf parts, and we got okay results with that. We were able to integrate it in a way that worked fairly well, but we kind of quickly saw that from a commercial standpoint, it didn't make sense for a lot of reasons. And
Yeah.
so we were like, okay, we're going to have to develop something a lot more advanced than just off-the-shelf parts. You know, from a business standpoint, it'd be great if we could just buy off-the-shelf stuff and integrate it. But
Right.
we saw that that wasn't going to work pretty early on. And connecting with the Center for Industrial Medical Ultrasound, CIMU, was a really good opportunity for us.
Well, did it give you access to sort of specialty equipment and parts?
Yeah, especially equipment parts, you
Got
know,
it.
some of the best minds in the world.
The mines.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's like I remember when we were initially looking like, okay, where are some places that we could, you know, partner with or, you know, collaborate with? And it's like, well, it's here or Moscow, Russia is where the research institutions are. So, you know, Seattle seems a little closer. You know, Seattle is one of the major birthplaces of ultrasound due to research into sonar
Interesting.
back in the 40s or so.
For yeah.
So
naval
there was
purposes.
there was a
Yeah.
huge amount of development there, and that's kind of where the applied physics lab started at
Oh, I
the University of
didn't know that.
Washington. It's one of the largest, if not the largest department at the university. It's not a degree granting department. They just do research, and they're very good at it.
Yeah.
You know, they don't get funding from, you know, academics. They're funded by the research that they do, and they've gotten very good at doing
Yeah.
it.
And so we came on as staff researchers at the University of Washington, and I think it's always been nice for us to have that as kind of like a backup plan and a source of income,
Yeah.
because it is a very risky thing to do.
Right. Right.
And then the director's been really amazing, so it's like sometimes we'll work a lot or a little bit, and he's really flexible to our situation. And then the work that we're doing there is just really cool too.
Okay, so let's talk. Actually, I don't think we've actually really formally stated what your product is and what your, you know, company is. Actually.
Yeah, and it's been a whole process of discovery. So I think by doing, starting working at the Center for Industrial Medical Ultrasound and doing all these customer discovery interviews, and it's evolved from that point even. And so what we went to all these pitch competitions in after doing those programs over the summer, we did a bunch of pitch competitions, and during that time we pitched on like this very big, very globally, very sustainable compact washer and dryer. By using ultrasound, because the ultrasound couples with the clothing.
Yeah.
It's uses acoustic energy to atomize the water off of the fabric, versus a heat-based process is a lot more energy intensive, and you have to dump a lot of heat into the wet clothing. Just to get it to dry.
Yeah.
And so we are moving towards an acoustic-based process. And then also for the washing, it uses cavitation. So by creating little bubbles in the water, when those bubbles collapse, it creates a vacuum and it sucks the dirt out of the clothing. So it's a lot different process mechanically altogether. And so that's a lot of what we're researching is around that. And I'd say there's still a lot of, we've gotten so deep into the physics. I think we didn't even realize, like, Cody in his grad school program ended up taking so many like acoustics classes, and there was so much in the beginning of the journey to now that it's just like, oh, what did we get into? And there's such deep learning in terms of technical, but also the market side, like that process of doing customer discovery. And so in the pitch competitions, we pitched this all-in-one washer and dryer to the 4 billion people.
So I didn't know that. They're just all. I was thinking the washer is
Yeah,
amazing, but
yeah.
it's the dryer and then it's combined.
That's what we pitched for the pitch competitions.
Right.
What we're working on now, I think, is different than that. I think it's evolved.
Yeah.
But I think that's what we were thinking while we did this pitch competition season for that. Well, for that year, Cody was in grad school and I hadn't started grad school yet.
Right.
And so I was kind of working full time on the company and really developing more of the business model, and we were doing more technical development. And so we did the national I-Corps program where we like interviewed like over 100 people.
Wow.
And just really talking to people who lived in like multi-family housing, people around the world, and just listening to their stories all around the world about how they did laundry. 4 billion people in the world washed clothes by hand in like 2010. And so it's come a long way since then. And I think everybody likes the American style washer and dryer. I think what we learned in our process of customer discovery is that we couldn't really go after the middle market. I think Americans like their washer and dryers how we are, and so we could either go after like the industrial end, like hotels and hospitals all send their laundry to these laundry plants, or make more of like the microwave for washers and dryers. And so those are the two ends of the market that make the most sense for us. People who live just in massive multifamily housing units that maybe don't have washers and dryers,
Right.
just because of the infrastructure required. You need all of this ventilation for a dryer.
Yeah.
You need a lot of power. And so it's a lot of people just simply don't have the resources to run washers and dryers.
Yeah.
They're very energy consuming.
Well, I mean, that's still, it's the people who live in apartment communities,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, that's still a big,
Yeah.
I know, because the one thing when you're hunting for apartments, you're looking for a place that has a washer and dryer.
Washer and dryer. That's
cost you
huge
$1,000 more or
decision-making.
something.
Yeah.
So if we can talk a little more about, so it doesn't actually require like the washer and dryer hookups that you have for, is that?
It would still have hookups, and what we're working on now is actually what we pitched was a lot different, I think, during the pitch competition season and kind of what we envisioned that in that direction. What we're working on now is mostly more on the industrial end.
Got
And
it.
so we realized over time, like what's easiest for us as a very small team is just to break it down into very bite-sized chunks. And so even before we start thinking about, like originally we're like, oh, we're gonna have to build a whole washer and dryer ourselves, and that was just a very big task. And then to produce it, and then it's like we had like companies coming to us and being like, hey, we've been working on this problem for so long. What are you guys building? What are you doing? And so we decided to focus on more on the industrial market, just focus on the drying aspect and just focus on creating a module that we could insert into existing technologies. And so that's what we realized was possible. And so a lot of our work has been breaking it down and seeing like what resources do we have? What are we capable of? What is the demand? And for like a consumer who maybe is living in this kind of situation, they don't maybe have the budget to spend as much, especially for these initial products that we make. It doesn't make sense in our business model to start there, even though that's somewhere that we'd like to get, versus like an industrial laundry plant spends hundreds of thousands of dollars on this equipment. So us selling them like a $20,000 insert isn't crazy at all.
No, I mean, I think, finding your entryway into the market takes
a long time. It took us so much customer discovery, talking to so many people. We were like, is it hotels? Is it hospitals? And then we were like, oh, actually all hotels and hospitals send their laundry to these plants, and like that's maybe where we should be entering.
Well, and that's a good market. Because they're all trying to be sustainable these days.
And so it definitely, like, it's been a long journey of understanding kind of an intersection between feasibility from both the technological and business side, as well as the demand and where the biggest problems are. The individual impact of a single washer and dryer isn't significant, but it's the aggregate impact across large populations of people using these appliances.
Right.
So we want to address that, but it's really difficult from a business standpoint to get to that point. But the impact of like industrial scale laundry, even for just a single facility or a single machine, is tremendous. And it also has a huge social significance as well. Like, when it's hospitals are reliant on these plants for their clean linens, which are essential for hygiene.
You had a statistic about hospitals. How many hospitals don't even actually have basic sanitation?
And then there can be a huge transmission point for disease as well. And so if you're not able to get the sheets completely clean, and then the next person comes in and uses the same sheets.
So they're not hospitals in the U.S. though, are there?
It depends on how strong the virus strain is. Usually they have requirements around sanitation, but sometimes some of these viruses can be quite strong.
It's a problem in the U.S., but our infrastructure has just been built out a lot more. But it's especially in places that have difficulty with access to power and clean water.
Which is unfortunate. I think it's still a large percentage of the world. It's really shocking.
It's tremendous.
Now it's interesting because it sounds like your journey is sort of multifold with the development of your professional careers intertwined with what's happening. But you guys you've hit a lot of competitions, and you're sort of a classic startup in the sense that you're both innovating in the field in which you have expertise. I think some people don't, they cross over. But also your two co-founders, you have a lot of experience and expertise between you. You could really just sort of go through the standard fundraising and get early investors in and stuff like that. And I think there's a lot of pressure for companies to do that. But you sort of like have stepped back a little, and you've gotten a lot of other, I want to call it non-dilutive funding, where funding is come to you, but they don't actually tell you anything about how you can use it. Can you talk about, was this a conscious decision? Did it just, because you must have had to spend some time finding these sources and preparing for them.
Yeah, I think that it was part of the learning process. I mean, maybe early on we thought that investment was a lot more in line with the way we wanted to grow. I mean, we knew it was going to be very expensive, to develop the product, to manufacture and build up all of the manufacturing and all the other aspects of the business that would be required to ship and deliver a product. But I think the more we learned, the more we got out there, the more we interacted with people. There's a lot of resources for the stage that we're at in terms of non-dilutive funding. There's grants from the government. We did a lot of pitch competitions and other programs to help us develop the business side. And I think just also a lot of the investors we interacted with. I mean, Seattle's big on software, and
that's right.
Talking to investors and being like, and hearing feedback like, oh, your business needs to be making cash flow positive in 3 to 6 months, and it's like we're building hardware. I think that a lot of people don't understand that hardware takes a really long time.
Thank you. Thank you. No, this is exactly right. It's like they're just sort of saying they have a cookie cutter formula, which is really based on software.
But especially in the Seattle area.
Exactly.
So and I think it's something that we had to learn, is that we don't need to change ourselves to try to get approval from investors, like they're the ones that are the authority, because it kind of seems that way, like they're experts and they know but they have a business model, and they're looking for certain companies that fit that business model, and we had to come to terms with the fact that we don't fit that business model, and we're a very impact-oriented company. We're not necessarily maximize profits, grow to $1 billion company in 3 to 5 years. It doesn't necessarily fit the VC business model, especially early on. We have a very long early development timeline, and it didn't fit the model, and that's something we had to come to terms with. And once we kind of made that decision and realized that what our company really is dependent on is revenue. That's our growth model, and that's what we should be focusing on. We should be focused on the customers. We shouldn't be thinking about investors, because they're pulling us in the wrong direction. That's not going to get us to that impact.
I wanted to thank you for bringing that up, because I think that is true, and I see a lot of young companies, even if they aren't the right fit, because they don't have the ability to assess that they're not the right fit, but they're getting advice that doesn't work for them, and there's a lot of pressure, and then they feel that they just aren't going to do it. They can't do it because they're not thinking of building their company, because they're so busy getting ready for fun. And it's a huge thing to prepare for fundraising.
We've seen that with other companies where they spend so much time preparing for fundraising, and then they didn't put the time into developing their product, and then they run out of runway, and then the company just kind of collapses. And so it's a hard decision to make, and especially if you see all these models around you of people, you just think like, oh, that's what I should be doing. And really that business model is such a fit for so few companies, and we are very far from revenue, and so then we do have to be thoughtful, hey, what do we do until then? How do we make money? And by not choosing that path, I think we can think about ourselves and make sure that we make decisions that are good for ourselves. I was like, hey, I want to get my MBA, I want to educate myself, and so I took the time to go to grad school and learn more resources and make sure that we know enough, and that when I'm standing in front of a room full of men telling me this, I'm like, hey, this is what I know, this is what I've learned, and this is what my customers want, and it doesn't really matter what you say, this is what's real.
That's one thing I really because it's tougher to go this route, if you're really, but you need some proving ground, as a founder. You need to have that space, hopefully, where no one's really looking at you, where you make your early mistakes. You're like, oh my God, this is going to be wrong, this is not going to happen, and you have your own growth period where you gain confidence, because I think if you don't, and then you go into the funding and you get people that come in with, it's really hard to keep control of your company and follow your vision. But that's why I was so excited that you guys are.
It's hard, I would say. These business models where it's like, oh, like I have all this experience and I'm just going to build this. It's very tempting to look at them and be like, oh, why am I not that? But then it's like we look at ourselves and there's assets that we do have, and we have taken the time to go get engineering degrees,
Right.
to go educate ourselves further, to be like, hey, I don't know enough, so I'm going to go to the Center for Industrial Medical Ultrasound and to educate ourselves and find the mentors that we need for the areas that we're weak in.
Yeah, and I think that's that's one thing that I'm hoping that people will. There are the resources out there, and sort of building your own resource and your own knowledge base is important, so that you can make some sort of an independent judgment in your situation.
Yeah, then when someone is just phony, or whatever their ideas come from their market and their experiences, and it's like it's just not going to apply to the laundry market. It's just a different market.
Yeah.
Or hardware, like a lot of the software things applying to hardware. It's just like, oh yeah, just get a product out there. It doesn't matter how bad it is, and just ship it. You can do that in a few weeks or something. It's like, no.
Hardware will kill people.
Not only will I burn someone's house down, but it's also like against federal laws.
Exactly. I mean, this is, in the software, they say, oh, just roll it out and let the customers beta test it. And we'll get an upgrade and we'll just.
Yeah. And it's nice when you can do that, because you still want to do that testing. And so we were able to do that through customer. And so you should still do this incremental testing. You shouldn't, because I feel like engineers on the other end of that, who the other end is just like, I'm not going to talk to anyone. So we also know engineers who have been building for like 7 years, the technology's done, and they've never talked to anyone about it. And so that's the other extreme. So you shouldn't be on either one. You should be talking to people the entire time and taking that feedback and integrating that.
It's there. You want to apply the lean business philosophy, but for hardware, that doesn't mean getting a completely finished product. Like ideally you do get to that MVP and you're able to continue that like the full loop of learning around that completed product. But early on, you're years away from an MVP.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, how can I learn from things that aren't a complete product, and thinking differently than the advice that's given by people that are coming from a larger software type of background. And that's been a big thing that we've learned, is where the critical assumptions are and how we can test those without having a completed product, because it's taking so long to build a completed product that we want to make sure that we're building the right thing. We're dedicating all that energy to the right thing.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And it was so great to hear you say that the hardware is, because I'm thinking, wait a minute, this is taking a lot longer. I had to take 2 times to fix this problem, and this, it's just like, you're like, this is just, what am I crazy? But you're right. It's just part of it is just having to deal with, like, for instance, cost, right? You have to just, not only do you have to make something work, but you have to figure out what's the cheapest way to build that. And that takes, and I also feel that, like, I was going to ask you, in the manufacturing space, I think that there's, it's, as a female going into the manufacturing space, I don't know if you have any thoughts about, being in the startup space as a female and sort of.
Yeah. And I would say, especially electrical engineering, there's more women in my MBA program who are electrical engineers than there were in my electrical engineering program. And so electrical engineering is very much a male-dominated space. Business is a little bit better, but I think the people who do hardware are still more male altogether. Maybe if we were in a different startup space, there might be more women, but our particular scene, laundry, industrial laundry, is very, very male. It's very old school, and they all go play golf together. And I think we need to learn to go play golf and these.
Cody,
it seems
are
fun.
you playing golf?
Yeah. Practicing,
So I think it's just to get into some of these networks. I think in some ways it's nice, and I bring I think maybe a fresh energy to it. And then in some ways I think I have gotten negative feedback as well, because it is maybe a different approach, and I'm a different style leader than maybe that they're used to seeing. I think I believe a lot more in listening to people. Oftentimes you're working with people because they know something that you don't know, and so I'm not a top-down leader at all. I'm very much like someone who listens a lot, and I feel like I had a group of mentors who was just like, oh, you're too thoughtful and you listen too much, and it's just like, oh, this is like, and so I feel like I didn't mesh well with those mentors, but I think it was a good learning experience to know who I should surround myself with.
I think there's definitely, like, you know, it's sort of the glitter of the startup space, which is this whole idea of what you should look like,
Yeah,
and how
yeah.
you should behave, and that I think is. I was in LA for a while, and that's the whole Hollywood LA thing. Is,
Yeah.
you know, and it's really not. I mean, it's people who work in the industry are really sort of devoted to the craft. It's not really. That's not really how they are.
Yeah,
You know,
that's
they're just-
interesting.
Yeah. And I think the reality of connecting with people is important.
Is important. Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Well,
really, yeah.
I think just, and it's just also it's in line with all of the modern like business leadership philosophy and,
Yeah.
and you know science that's been developed around leadership and understanding that like when you're a very dominating person, which kind of it is, yeah, in electrical engineering, it's very common. Just whoever's the loudest in the room or the most
Yeah.
you know aggressive is the one whose ideas are heard and implemented, and that shuts out everyone else. And so
almost
it's like in a
primal.
lot of working environments, and you know, it's
Yeah.
engineering, it's business.
Yeah.
It's that the loudest person is, you know, is actually a limiting factor because you know the team can only be as good as the you know the whether they're the expert or they're just the loudest.
Right.
They're preventing all of the other people from having a perspective.
Yeah.
And that's not the point of having a team.
Yeah.
And so that's been something that like when not everyone likes that, you know, like you're saying, like you know in a lot of circles in the startup space, people want an extremely authoritarian leader
Yep.
that yells at everyone and
Yep.
you know makes everyone work
Steve
18
Jobs.
hours
Yeah.
a day. And
And they're kind of judging you on that. You know?
Yeah,
This is-
yeah.
There's that
The expectation. Yeah, it's hard to break people's mental models, and it's like, is the mental model for a CEO someone who's like a mom, who's like really empathetic and like cares about people, or is it someone more like Steve Jobs, and if you bring him bad news, he might like take it out on you? Like when, so it's like you have to really get away from that, and I think redefine what people's perceptions are, and just show people, hey, there's more ways of doing things.
No, I agree. Do you guys have any like stories that stick out in your mind about sort of aha stories, moments along your journey that really sort of stand out for?
Yeah, I feel like there's a few scenes that I think that we were. I feel like the person that told us you need to be revenue positive in 3 to 6 months, we're like, oh, this is not for us. This is not. I feel like that was a good. We walked away. I think.
I applaud your independent thinking. I really do.
Well, just is it possible to even get like parts in 3 to 6 months? It's just like logistically impossible. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, 1 minute, what are we doing here?
yeah, and that was like during the tail end of the pandemic, so it's,
Yeah.
but it was someone who like built a lot of hardware.
Yeah,
and so it was kind of out of touch. It's like
Yeah.
you just told me that it took you 18 months to build a much similar product than what we're building, and so but I think something that kind of a big learning experience wasn't necessarily a moment. Maybe that particular experience was a wake up call. Is that for every person who's clearly not a good fit, or you know, there's a lot of it's not a good relationship, you know, either aggressive or dominating, or, you know, there's just too much mismatch in ideas or ways of thinking. I mean, you know, like conflict is good, like difference of opinion is good, but not,
Right.
you know, conflict.
Right.
But for every person that doesn't work, there are some people that are very well aligned and, you know, experts in that area, or, you know, very willing and able to help. And so something that we've gotten very lucky, you know, with respect to is, that we've worked with so many different people and, you know, different mentors and different peers, like, you know,
Yeah.
other startups and things,
Yeah.
that we've had a lot of exposure and kind of seen that, you know, if we don't need to stick with one person and get stuck with like a mentor that's dragging us in the wrong direction, and we don't need to, you know, go for the first investor that's willing to give us money.
Right.
We can make choices. I mean, it's our
Yeah.
business, and we need to
Yeah.
do it in a way that's thoughtful and sustainable, and understand what kind of business we're trying to build. You know, so we are trying to build a business with a really good culture, and that starts with the way that we behave, and the
Yeah.
people that we bring on early on really determine that.
Yeah.
And so we've gotten much better at filtering.
Yeah.
But filtering's a really hard skill. It's, I think, one of the hardest skills as a founder, because you need to learn. Everything that you're working on is learning
Yeah.
a lot of things that you don't know, or maybe no one knows.
Yeah.
And so you can't just deny everything that doesn't agree with your viewpoint. You have to be really
Yeah.
willing to be receptive to feedback or advice,
Yeah.
but know when the painful advice is good advice or if it's completely
Yeah.
misplaced.
Yeah.
And so that's been a really difficult thing. But I feel like once we've kind of accepted that, like filtering is a really important part of it. That's made it a lot easier to be like, okay, we're going to learn some things and we're going to learn some hard lessons.
Yeah.
But there's going to be some feedback that we just need to not like spend our time and energy and waste all the the emotional burden of dealing with people that aren't don't have our best interest.
Yeah, understanding where they're coming from too, because oftentimes you think, okay, why is this person telling me this? What is their story? What is their background? And if you really understand what made them successful, because a lot of times people have survivorship bias, they're like, this is what worked for me, therefore it should work for you too. But then you're like, okay, 1 minute, this was your business, this is what you've done. I understand what I should take from you that's relevant, and then really get more data points. The more data points you get, the more that you can find a trend line. And then once you find those trend lines, listen to that trend line instead of a single data point dragging you off in a random direction.
Yeah, I think that gaining some objectivity in your perspective is hard when, especially like you're so invested in the product idea that you have. For me, it's just like stepping back, I think is valuable. And I think it's been, it seems like it's been great for you guys because you have had access to a wealth of mentors, not just
we're
one.
very, very active. And I think a lot of the business plan competitions, and I think the resources for entrepreneurs opened up a lot. A lot of that is the reason that we went to grad school. It opened up a lot more opportunities for us to participate in more programs, because a lot of these programs are very student oriented. And so because we're taking the time to educate ourselves, then it's actually, we've had a really positive experience. I think probably a more positive experience than a lot of people have had. And I think that's taken us very, very far.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to talk about was that I was surprised to learn, like when they build all these startups in a C corporate structure, that one of the reasons is because there is a lot of fallout among the founding team.
Yeah, I think that's very common.
Yeah, and I was shocked to hear that, but and that's why they do the vesting schedule and everything, because it's like people.
I'm not surprised.
And or
it's
they
hard.
fight and they disagree, and then
it's your baby. You fight over your baby. Yeah. Cody and I think we are very passionate, and I think and it's conflict is very, very healthy. I think Cody and I are so strong is because you want to be able to stand up for what you believe in, and you actually want healthy conflict. So you want conflict about the problem, but you don't want any like relationship conflict that'll just, people will stop tuning out, and it should never be personal. But if you can like come to a place and actually be able to say everything that you're thinking, and like have a place where you can have disagreements, like that disagreements those are really important, and that will make your company stronger. I think that's true. It's really emotional to do. It's very, very difficult to do. I feel like we've gotten very, very emotional about it because we both care so much, but it wouldn't work if Cody was completely apathetic, or if I was completely apathetic, and then one of us was just driving it, and the other person was like, I can't deal with this emotionally, and I'm just gonna tune out, like I'll just follow you, like that. That wouldn't work.
A key part of that is that we have very different perspectives, and we care about we care about the same thing. We have the same objectives, but our perspectives and the way we approach problem solving is very different. And we advocate strongly for that perspective. And in talking about that, and debating, we're able to come to more of a consensus or a compromise. And usually that outcome is much better than if we just stuck with one thing. And I think it helps us. It
makes us stronger because we care the most about our product, and I think that's also why we were so successful in so many business plan competitions, because we had gone through it with each other in a way that was very passionate, in a way that we very cared about it, and it's like we didn't pull back any punches with each other. We're like, hey, like this is everything we're thinking, like it's gonna fail this way, it's gonna fail this way, this doesn't work, this is dumb, this technology is crazy, like, and so just like really us just going at it like in a not the most rosy way, and then when we go and present to other people, like we've thought about everything.
You guys should do a webinar about all that stuff. I'm sure you could teach a course about this, because I think this is, it's this whole gray area where a lot of founders, they just struggle, and a lot of times they struggle on their own. They don't know to reach out to get some help, and sometimes the help's not,
Good
very
help.
And it's especially if you're trying to do something new and different. I want to backtrack now.
can you let's talk about the competitions that you guys run, so we can sort of mention them, because they all
we
deserve
were
a
talking
mention.
about them, but I feel like we haven't gone through them all. Yeah.
What was the first one that you?
It was the Eastern Washington University competition. So once we won that one, and Cody was in grad school, and we're like, hey, we're going to do this full time. We also contacted our friend who went to Eastern Washington University with us, and he was going to grad school for entrepreneurship. And so we're like, okay, we need to bring in someone on the business side. And so we wrote a memorandum of understanding. So we wrote an MOU saying, hey, we're going to go through all these pitch competitions together. And then luckily we capped it. We were like, hey, most of the things we're going to split in thirds, but if it's over 10,000, if it's over a certain amount, then you only get like 7,500. The max is 7,500 that you could get, which is really good that we put that in there. Because we ended up being so successful in the pitch competition circuit. I mean, a lot of it was because we had done these programs over the summer where we did this customer discovery, we were pitching on a regular basis. We had a lot of people going in, and every time we would take it and we would refine it. And so we would gone and really educated ourselves. And so then when we went into pitch competition season, we were really, really strong. And depending on who was running the pitch competition, I think that gave us awareness. So I think there was just knowing if it was like, hey, Meta's putting on this pitch competition, or Mitsubishi, like what do they want about it? And so I think we had the right kind of business, and then we had a very diverse team, and so it looked good.
Yeah.
And then it was just like, oh, this technology is having this impact, and it's these students at the University of Washington, and they're at the applied physics lab. And so it was all these things that people recognized. And then it was also a novel thing. A lot of times in the pitch competitions, it's just like, oh, I've heard this idea, I've seen this again. So it's like something that no one had heard before. The team had a really good composition. It had this social impact. And so we checked a lot of boxes for a lot of people. And so I think that was part of the just some self-awareness, because I think a lot of people, they're like, oh, I could go do what you guys did, and it's just like checked all the things that they want the sponsors to promote, like, oh, hey, we care about these causes too.
I call it a deep impact product because it literally impacts people's daily lives and makes it so much better. I mean, people I was shocked to learn how many people still wash clothing by hand.
Yeah, and I think it's decreasing. A lot of people are buying American style washers and dryers, but I think it's not going to look the same in other places.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily a good thing. It's a good thing because, I mean, laundry predominantly falls to women. It's doing it by hand is a massively time-consuming activity, and it frees up a lot of time for other things. Mm-hmm. But it's a problem because American-style washers and dryers are extremely resource-intensive.
Yes,
and
exactly.
if everyone on the planet adopts them, it's completely, it's not something
sustainable.
sustainable.
No, exactly. And I think that, there's definitely initiatives coming down the line where these problems will have to be addressed. We're not going to be able to continue doing that, and so that's why I think it's very timely. I'm rooting for the consumer product. I'm ready to buy it.
I feel like I am too. I'm trying to revamp my closet. So, but I think it'll be a long time.
Every laundry day, it's
that's what we think about it. We're like, we're working on a laundry project.
I think you guys should talk to. There's a couple of like the micro housing people that are building.
We've talked to a few. We talked to a lot of architects, micro housing builders. The things that exist currently are so slow, and so sometimes when we talk to people about like, oh, more sustainable washer and dryer, they're like, does it take 4 hours? Is it gonna like smell better? Like, because a lot of times it takes so long, and then their laundry isn't clean in the end, so people have very frustrating experiences with the current processes.
Wow.
And so they're excited if we can improve on it in any way.
No, absolutely. Any events coming up for your company? I know that you guys you're still in development. And so we wish you all the best on that, and hopefully we're gonna just follow you and keep track of you guys.
Awesome,
see
great.
how you're doing later. But I know that you guys had a recycling project that you were doing on the side.
That was just a student. I feel like at the university we were trying to maximize all of our opportunities, and so one of the things that we did there was a plastic recycling thing, totally unrelated, just kind of like a student club thing. Cody was hoarding so much plastic from 3D printing, and then I was like, this is actually too much like it's taking up a significant amount of space.
And I think that it wasn't totally unrelated. I mean, it's just doing a lot of prototyping work, you accumulate a ton of 3D printed waste, which is not recyclable through conventional waste streams. And but it's like thermoplastics are so readily recyclable that it just didn't make sense to throw it away.
Yeah.
And so like over 5 years of engineering accumulated a lot of plastic. And it wasn't just about my experience. It was that everyone who I
Very
knew
common.
that owned a 3D printer, which
Yeah.
is, I mean, there's 300 million 3D printers in the US,
Yeah.
like almost one for every person, and all of them are generating this waste. And there isn't really a good solution at scale, but I think that's through my experience and a lot of people wanting to solve this problem. There's this organization called Precious Plastics, and they have resources for like open source recycling tools. And so there wasn't really a lot going on in the Seattle area in terms of like accessible 3D printing recycling.
Right.
But it's all also translates to plastic recycling in general.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be just 3D printed.
Yeah.
So yeah, we started a group and got some equipment together to be able to recycle like the makerspaces on campus. Different people that are doing 3D printing in their dorms, or the students.
I could not get a straight answer from the makerspaces. How are you recycling? When you print that stuff, especially I was using PETG. I'm like, here's it. But it's like this is what I learned on the seed grant is that a lot of the proprietary plastic can't be recycled.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a
Not in these
facility is a
waste
very
streams.
complicated
It's
situation.
complicated.
And then it comes in as a bunch of strings or parts.
Yeah,
and
it's too
They don't know what
small.
it is, and so it's like almost every shared workspace that I've been to, the 3D printing waste just goes straight into the trash can.
Yeah, that's the most.
Or they hoard it.
Or they hoard it. Yeah, they're like, there's a way to.
They hoard it for
reuse
future solution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here it is.
So you guys, people can bring their plastics to you or meet you somewhere.
We've
on
been
one of
doing
your
pop-ups
events?
around
Yeah.
campus, and so we made it really, really portable, so it could be more accessible.
Awesome.
And so we'll pop up different places, and so but we haven't quite managed to get the word out there that so mostly people walk by and they're like, oh, it's cool that you're out here, but I think some sort of schedule where people know like, hey, we'll be here at this time, bring us your plastics.
Yeah, so it's definitely still very much under development.
Awesome.
I graduated, so I'm just helping as an advisor.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're working on growing the organization and hopefully getting some space on campus. That's been kind of the struggle.
Well, have you guys have you contacted any of the makerspaces off campus?
We've been working, I guess not off campus. We've contacted the ones on
There's
campus.
3 big ones on.
There's
a lot
3
of
big
them.
ones on campus. Yeah.
Thank you. It's so great to hear that you're in the middle of all these things.
Yeah.
We look forward to keeping touch with you and learning more about what's happening and learning more about when the product might be ready.
Yeah. We just got our first small business innovation research grant, and so we're a bit heads down,
Congratulations.
focused on that right now.
Oh
and
my
so
gosh,
we'll be working
awesome.
on that for the next year, and then hopefully we'll apply for phase 2 and see how that goes.